See you in your dreams. Oh, come back anytime. Bring your friends.
One fine day, while walking across a bridge, the King of Horror was struck by an idea which went on to take the shape of a legendary horror story. It was published in 1986, and the ever-frightening deranged clown began its eternal journey of haunting people. However, till 1990, all we had was our imagination running wild, and an abstract idea of how Pennywise looked, based on King's detailed description. Thankfully, after 4 years of spooking people in print, Pennywise finally crawled out of both the sewer and the book's pages to make its majestic on-screen appearance. With the It miniseries, Lee Wallace brought Pennywise to life in flesh and blood, which would go on to become the cornerstone for later movie and show adaptations of the story. With HBO's It, Welcome to Derry making all the buzz, it only makes sense to check some insane facts about the very first show that took us to Derry. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The show was supposed to be directed by George A. Romero. The Night of the Living Dead's famed director, George A. Romero, was initially signed to direct the project when ABC decided to air it over 4 two-hour blocks, making it an overall 8 to 10-hour series. However, for whatever reason, ABC flipped and announced on June 1st, 1989, that it would instead be a 6-hour series directed by Romero. No cast had been finalized by then, and in January 1990, ABC executive Dan Doran stated that it would take a long time to finish developing the series, adding that Romero's involvement was only tentative. Yep, they gave people hope that Pennywise would be brought to life by the man who created one of the first zombie movies, and then just started beating around the bush. If you're smelling foul play here, you're absolutely right. Romero himself mentioned that he was deeply committed to the project, had worked on the effects, prepared storyboards, and written tons of script pages and notes. He was unhappy with the reduction in runtime and wanted at least 8 hours to tell the story properly. However, the more commonly cited reason for his exit was scheduling conflicts, as he was preparing to direct the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead. Romero was reportedly heartbroken about leaving the venture, comparing it to the time when he had to drop out of Pet Sematary. Still, he refused to compromise on the reduced hours, believing it would have lessened the series' impact. In the end, he felt that abandoning the project was a blessing in disguise. The series faced constant changes in runtime. Once George A. Romero was out of the picture, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch director Lee Wallace agreed to take the helm. However, the producers were still uncertain about the show's total runtime. They weren't willing to commit to the extra work required to make it an 8 to 10-hour series. ABC now wanted a tighter schedule and a smaller budget to deliver the project. The series was initially condensed into a 3-part format, but in the end, Wallace had to tell Pennywise's story in just 2 parts, both of which drew unparalleled viewership. Ultimately, the runtime came down to 3 hours and 12 minutes across what was initially planned as a 4-episode production. Wallace had to work under significant constraints and wrapped up filming in British Columbia, Canada within 3 months. Fortunately, the budget was around $12 million, nearly double what most TV productions received at the time. It allowed Wallace and his team to give it a feature film feel. Despite all the serious adjustments made in the boardroom meetings, the miniseries still stands as one of the best horror television shows out there. It faced quite a lot of filming difficulties. The infamous balloon explosion scene that spooked an entire generation was a pain in the neck to shoot. The blood-filled balloon was supposed to be burst in Beverly's bathroom, but the crew had an extremely hard time getting it to blow up at the right moment. Emily Perkins, who played Beverly, stated that they had 10 pairs of pajamas with varying amounts of blood splatter, plus a few extra sets in case they needed to redo a scene. Everyone was highly focused on the mechanics of it and had to film multiple takes to capture the perfect shot of the balloon emerging from the drain into Beverly's bathroom before going boom. She also shared that filming such an intense scene in a cramped room filled with 60 people completely took away the scary element of the sequence. On top of that, the adult cast had their share of troubles too. They had to endure an incredibly rough time while filming the final sewer scene, since they were walking through an area full of rust, which made them vulnerable to tetanus infections infections. Things kept getting more difficult for Wallace when the final shot with Bill and Audra Denbrough required days of rehearsal, and the clock was ticking. Oh, and to top it all off, a few people even got injured on set during the library scene, where objects were flying all over the place. How did Tim Curry land the role of Pennywise? Various actors, including Roddy McDowall and Malcolm McDowell, were considered for the role. In fact, the production even thought of casting the American singer and songwriter Alice Cooper. While we'll never know how Alice would have fared as the batshit crazy dancing clown, Tim Curry gave us no reason to complain. He had already made a place for himself after his role in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and everyone gladly went ahead with him. Oh boy, did he blow our minds with that brilliant performance. Interestingly, Tim shared his views on playing Pennywise. The character was more of a personification of psychological torture for him, and its essence lay in mental cruelty over physical horror. He further explained that Pennywise was a smile gone bad for him, and that's exactly the outline he followed on the set. However, Curry initially was not keen to take on the role. Having already been in the makeup chair for long hours while filming Legend, Curry was not ready to go through that same pain again. However, Wallace compromised by giving Curry a lighter clown makeup, and honestly, had it not been for such a convincing performance by Curry, the makeup would have been a pebble in the shoe. Interestingly, it was Curry's performance which stayed truest to King's portrayal of Pennywise. Curry came off as a friendly jester with a deceptive smile, unlike Bill Skarsgård's depiction, which was rooted in more sinister aspects. Curry's makeup was influenced by Lon Chaney. Since I mentioned Tim Curry's makeup, let me tell you the secret Phantom of the Opera connection Pennywise had. Makeup artist Bart Mixon stated that the look took some creative liberties and based Pennywise's look on Lon Chaney from the 1925 film. Bart talked about his experience while creating Pennywise's appearance, like starting the process with designing over photos and making 3 sculptures for his head cast. He then did 2 makeup tests on Curry, one with the domed head, the signature round red nose, and a paint style suggested by the director. The other look was crafted with the cheekbones and the paint, according to Bart. The lighter one was chosen, as promised by Wallace, and Bart clarified that even the shape of Pennywise's head was inspired from Chaney. Bart further mentioned that he created 2 versions of Pennywise's expression, one that would seem warm and welcoming, and another that would reveal its true demonic side to the kids. Bart claimed that it was the Phantom of the Opera's influence that made the 1990s Pennywise iconic. I actually agree. Tim Curry actually scared the shit out of the child actor. To us, Curry was a brilliant actor, but for once, thinking about the little boy who had to play Pennywise's prey, the 8-year-old Tony Dakota, who is cast as the ill-fated Georgie Denbrough, actually ended up yelling in fear in one of the scenes. Oh, poor baby. Tim recalled in an interview that while they were filming the classic shot in which Georgie floated his paper boat down the gutter, he then tried to retrieve it by reaching inside, but Pennywise grabbed him out of the blue. Curry uttered the words, "Down here we float," and a petrified Tony pulled his hand away, breaking down and shouting, "You're scaring me." Curry calmly replied that he was sorry, but that was precisely what he was expected to do. Director Ryan Grulich, who made the 2019 short Georgie, had Tony Dakota reprising his role. Grulich disclosed what a young Tony's time with Tim was like. Grulich shared that the boy was way too intimidated by Curry, and given his tender age, the experience affected him psychologically, and somehow it helped his performance. According to him, Curry was very cautious of the fans' reactions, and that awareness pushed him to deliver a level of intensity which made the role a landmark in his life. Other child actors like Brandon Crane and Seth Green confirmed that Curry was so damn frightening in his getup that they largely avoided him on set. The child actors of the Losers Club, including Seth Green and Brandon Crane, have confirmed that Curry was so convincing that they largely avoided him on set. Curry tried his best to cheer everyone. Shooting any project takes a toll on the cast and crew, and one can only imagine how exhausting it could have been when the team was filming something as gloomy and grave as It. Curry knew he appeared as a monster to the child actors and often scared them, and being the sweetheart he is, he made sure to be cordial with them in between shots. Sometimes, the wait hours between the shots would be long, and with the child extras waiting for retakes. At that point, Curry would become their entertainer. He would often come on stage fully dressed in makeup and conduct sing-alongs with the extras, while most of them didn't even know who he was. In fact, the naive children thought he was actually a clown hired by the production to make the shoot funny. Co-actors and the crew have shared that Tim was known for his charm and humor, as opposed to the terrifying persona he would put on the moment the cameras began rolling. Tim Curry was way too committed to his role. In spite of the initial hesitations about all the powder puffs on his face and the heavy prosthetics, Tim started thinking like Pennywise would do once he signed the contract. The character consumed him so much that Curry ended up developing a whole new voice. He gave Pennywise a Brooklyn accent, which inadvertently reminded viewers of the old-time Catskills comic. This gave a unique, unsettling layer to Curry's Pennywise and added an ominous playfulness to the otherwise monstrous clown. Curry's voice modulation went on to become a benchmark for later horror movies. I mean, think about it. The puppet from Saw would barely be as scary without Tobin Bell's voice. Or go back to the Conjuring movies. Do you think they would have felt the same without Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson holding it together? The truth is, horror icons stay with us because of the human touch behind them, and Tim Curry's voice change acted as the blueprint for all of them. The miniseries changed ABC Network's fate. It catapulted ABC into fame, and the network aired the show in 2 parts. Both the parts got an overwhelming response, with the first one pulling in about 17.5 million viewers. The second one reached an even larger range of viewers, with over 19.2 million people turning on their televisions just to see a dangerous clown slaughter children. Now, this was during a time when recording television programs on tape with a VCR was pretty common. Consequently, the second part of the It Show became the most taped series by November 1990. The limited series became a universal hit in no time, with Pennywise reaching France and the UK in 1993 and 1994 respectively, and expanding this horizon of haunting. The show got multiple nominations, including a spot in the Emmy Awards, Youth in Film, and Eddie Awards. It even managed to win 2 of them, namely an Emmy for Outstanding Music Composition, for which Richard Bellis should be duly credited, and an Eddie Award for the incredible editing of the show. Tim Curry had to endure a lot to play Pennywise. For a very long time, the very sight of red hair made me uncomfortable, thanks to Pennywise. The ancient creature is known for its famous, frizzy, over-the-top crimson hair, and when Tim Curry landed the role in 1990, he executed it with utmost dedication. Sure, Curry had his inhibitions about going through a lengthy makeup process, but that didn't mean he wasn't devoted enough. In fact, the man became so engrossed in the role that he went on to grow his hair and got it frizzed up every single day. Yes, the huge bush of redness on Curry's head was not a wig, it was all him. The makeup artists would then dye his hair into a questionable shade of red, which added authenticity to Pennywise's look. He even had to wear a set of nasty yellowed teeth, which was customized for him from polymorph plastic. Despite reducing the use of prosthetics, Curry still had to spend at least 3 hours in front of the dressing table while Bart treated him as his art project. However, once he was up to endure all of it, Curry became Pennywise. He would try to stay in character in between shots at times, smoking one cigarette after another, and show his unsettling teeth to the kids if they came too close. Basically, the role did strain him. While on the one hand, Curry tried to be affectionate toward the innocent kids, on the other hand, he knew just how much of himself had to go into making Pennywise real. The 1990 miniseries used Pennywise's balloons differently. For the Gen Zs, Bill Skarsgård turned out to be the ultimate Pennywise, and a red balloon became the clown's trademark. To depict Pennywise only with a bright red balloon, and to use it even on the posters, was actually a creative choice for a couple of reasons. Red in horror flicks is often linked with menacing activities, rage, blood, and even death. Fans, however, believed the color signified that the balloon contained the souls of the dead children, along with the orange balls of dead lights. Anyway, the point is, a red balloon became a symbol of Pennywise's insatiable hunger. However, in the novel, Stephen King did not restrict Pennywise's balloons to a single color. Instead, Pennywise was portrayed as a clown who would use multicolored balloons to support his clown getup and lure in kids. The fact that King associated grief and fear with all the colors of the rainbow made balloons even scarier, stripping them of any shred of joy they once carried. Thankfully, Wallace made sure to stay as close to the source material as possible, and Tim Curry's Pennywise thus sported different colored balloons. To be a 90s kid and walk down the streets knowing that any simple balloon could be potentially fatal made Pennywise a real threat. Wallace's regret over the second installment. Despite getting a better viewership for the second part, the show started disappointing the audience and slipped downwards. The last episode became highly controversial among the audience, who were unhappy with the overly melodramatic portrayal of Pennywise in the end. Sadly, Wallace himself was not happy with what he delivered. He admitted in a DVD commentary that the adult actors were just not compelling enough to give out the same sense of fright compared to the young ones, and people couldn't agree more. Wallace further stated that the end of King's novel was way too cerebral in nature, and to recreate that in full capacity was nearly impossible, even with millions of dollars. That's probably why the grown-ups side of the story became a little dull. The director was particularly upset about the final battle with Pennywise, where the new cast did not come off as magnetic enough. He even tried to realize King's vision as much as possible by depicting a spider towards the end. We know how vital the spider is. According to King, the huge Lovecraftian spider was the closest thing to its true form, which was comprehensible by the human mind. Unfortunately, the spider bothered a lot of viewers. However, it turned out that Wallace could never show the real design he had in mind. The original design was intended to be more muscular and creepy because it wasn't physically possible to build or animate with the technology or materials available at the time. The team stated that it was a champagne idea on a beer budget. The spider we saw already took 12 weeks to build and needed stop-motion animation, apart from putting special effects artist Brent Baker inside it. Baker too was injured when it fell to its side during the final face-off. Personally, I think the miniseries should be acknowledged for trying to realize King's novel as genuinely as possible, given the era. The rain gods helped Wallace and crew. The unforgettable sequence where the kids went inside the sewers required a rainy setting according to the script. Gray skies, thunder rumbling, and incessant rain was what the director wanted to capture the true essence of the scene, which was meant to be rooted in a melancholic mood. Initially, the team thought that they would have to resort to rain machines to create fake weather, but surprisingly, it just started raining on the shoot day. Everyone was ecstatic and called it a stroke of luck, because nothing could have made the scene so eerily authentic had the rain gods not been pleased with Wallace. Not only did the downpour help cut costs and reduce the extra effort needed by the editing team, but the real rain also helped etch the scene in cinematic history. Wallace made sure the actors felt at home while shooting. The man was working with a predominantly young cast, and it was crucial to let them draw from their own experiences to make their performances believable. He ensured that the child and adult actors spent ample time together to build genuine rapport, since the entire dynamic would have fallen apart if they hadn't picked up on each other's mannerisms. Moreover, Wallace encouraged the young actors to bring a piece of themselves to the set. For instance, all the medicines used by Eddie for his alleged asthma actually belonged to Dennis Christopher in real life. This thoughtful trick helped the two age groups develop a remarkable bond and portray their characters as authentically as possible. He even let Ritter keep one of the playing cards with Pennywise's face on it as a memento. In short, Wallace was a genius who juggled an ensemble cast, kept them satisfied, and pulled off the filming flawlessly. Tim Curry made sure not to see himself in the clown makeup. There's no doubt that Tim Curry's fame doubled once he stepped into Pennywise's shoes. He left everyone awestruck with his outstanding acting and recalled meeting two types of fans: those who couldn't stop praising him and the other set who started fearing the very sight of him. The moment an actor's on-screen identity begins overshadowing their real-life personality, you know that they've done something remarkable. However, it might be disturbing for the performer who had no intention to carry on the role for the rest of his life, and particularly for Tim Curry, who had coulrophobia. Yes, as ironic as it sounds, Curry was shit scared of clowns, and that's exactly why he did not really enjoy playing Pennywise, and most importantly, being Pennywise forever. Curry made sure to sign a contract before accepting the role, which explicitly stated that he would not have any reflective surfaces around him when he was in full costume and makeup. He shared that he could not look at himself in the mirror, and a makeup technician almost got fired for accidentally carrying a mirror in his hand while putting the paint on Tim. Decades went by, yet Curry could not come to terms with his recognition as Pennywise and Pennywise alone. He mentioned that it became difficult to have a conversation with people, which would inadvertently bring up the dancing clown, something that Curry wanted to leave behind. Brandon Crane and John Ritter's real-life experience accentuated their performance. Ben Hanscom was the smartest member of the Losers Club, who was described as having short brown hair and being overweight. Though the 1990 series portrayed him as somewhat bulkier than downright obese, the parts where Ben would get bullied by Henry Bowers and his gang still made a big part of his story. While shooting those insulting sequences, Wallace noticed that Brandon Crane, who played the young Ben's rage, seemed very real for some reason. As it happened, Brandon was bullied in real life because of his weight. Coming to John Ritter, who was cast as the adult Ben, he too had a personal connection with the role. Yes, John was playing the better, leaner, and more successful version of Ben, but he still related to it from a childhood experience. Ritter was called a loser by his friends during his most depressed time, and that helped to flesh out Ben Hanscom's role more genuinely. The 1990 series inspired an Indian remake. I bet even Pennywise never knew he had an Indian cousin. However, he actually does. Stephen King's novel And the Inglorious Clown got remade into a Hindi version in 1998, 8 years after the first show achieved universal success. Before I begin discussing this show, let me warn you not to get your hopes high about it, because the Indian rendition was nothing but an abomination, which translates to It in Hindi. The television series starred a popular Indian actor, M.M. Farooqui, who is better known as Lilliput. Farooqui is indeed a great performer and has quite a lot of admirers, but he couldn't do justice to Pennywise in any way. Written and directed by Ankush Molla and Barreto, the setting was changed from Maine to the Indian town of Panchgani in the Satara district of Maharashtra. Reportedly, Molla and Barreto never actually read the book, but were intrigued by its summary on the cover, and Wallace's series further influenced them. Frankly, I haven't watched the show, and nor do I have the guts to do so, because, wait for it, Pennywise was portrayed as someone who was teased for being too short and hence became a vengeful spirit after death. Yeah, no. The series lost out on a great screenwriter. Once King learned that It was being adapted for television and that Lawrence D. Cohen was tasked with scripting duties, he felt that the project was in safe hands. Moreover, initial news that Romero would don the director's hat further reassured King, who has always been very sensitive about It. Cohen was considered to be one of the finest writers in the industry. After he wrote the screenplay for the Brian De Palma directed movie Carrie in 1976, Carrie 2 was based on King's novel by the same name and became a famous movie in the genre. However, soon after Romero left the venture, Cohen also ended up exiting from it. He wasn't ready to trim things down according to ABC's demands and lost faith in the project once it was declared to be a two-parter. Moreover, when Wallace came on board, he wanted Cohen to rewrite it, stating dissatisfaction with the second half. That would have required the writer to dedicate at least 3 more weeks of work, and honestly, he had already done enough for the project by this time. Cohen got busy with other projects and walked out of the miniseries, causing Wallace to fix the script by himself. Many fans consider the version rewritten by Wallace to be inferior to what Cohen had in mind. The King of Horror was as far away from the series as possible. The trend of adapting King's work into movies and shows started to blow up Hollywood in the 80s. As a result, we got some masterpieces like The Shining and The Dead Zone, while others received an underwhelming response. This included King's only directorial, Maximum Overdrive, and Dan Attias's 1985 film Silver Bullet, based on King's novel Cycle of the Werewolf. From time to time, King has been involved in various projects to different degrees, but when it came to the 1990 show, he did not participate at all. King knew the series was in development, and he gave it his blessings, but since he had no contractual rights to put in his thoughts into how it would be made, King decided to refrain himself from getting involved in it. Be it the script or casting, Stephen King had zero say in the making of it. He also confessed that he barely had any expectations from the miniseries. Rather, his hopes were in the basement. Given the book was over 1,000 pages, he couldn't really fathom how a 4-hour-long network series, that too with commercials in between, would cover it. Surprisingly, he did like the show in the end, and admired how ambitious and fearsome it was. The series took a dig at King's rival. Though the two authors have never officially admitted to the Cold War, everyone knows that things are sour between Stephen King and Dean Koontz, who are both popular authors in the horror genre. Personally, no one can barely reach the strata and love King holds, but Koontz has definitely given us some great scares with Phantoms of 1983 or The Darkfall of 1984. Both the authors are commendable in their own rights and have very unique writing styles. Still, it seems that most people have a softer spot for King, and the maker of the 1990 miniseries was definitely one of them. King himself started this tongue-in-cheek dig at Koontz when he named a character as John Koontz in the novel. However, King never openly admitted to John Koontz having any connection to his rival author, but we connected the dots. Wallace kept that idea intact in the series and introduced a character named Koontz, who had a meager and pretty disturbing job as the Juniper Hill Asylum's guard. It didn't stop there. When Pennywise wanted to recruit Henry Bowers to attack the returning members of the Losers Club, he was stuck in Juniper Hill and had to be broken free. Wallace even showed the part where Koontz got ripped apart by Pennywise, disguised as a ferocious Doberman to sharpen the joke, because Koontz is known to be a dog lover. Bev's abusive partner never made it to the screen. Those of us who had already read the book were always skeptical about how the miniseries would manage to fit in all the essential plot points within such a short span, and it turns out our fears were right. It's nothing new though. Every movie or show adaptation of a novel goes through rampant snipping. Wallace was no exception, and he chose to heavily cut down the scenes with Bev's boyfriend, Tom Rogan. Indeed, the segment with Rogan was a subplot, but it was a pretty important one. Compared to the novel or Cohn's actual script, Tom's appearance and narrative barely got any breathing time in the series. He was shown for a minimal time when he threatened Bev violently, but she managed to escape. However, King gave Tom a much larger role, causing more trouble for everyone after becoming Pennywise's puppet and being manipulated into doing its bidding. Things didn't end well for him, and Tom ended up dying after seeing its true form. This part was one of the first to be removed when Wallace rewrote the script, and that's precisely why many believe his changes affected the show negatively. The deal with the fortune cookie scene. The famous Chinese restaurant scene where the Losers Club reunited for the first time after 27 years was a genuine glimpse of food horror. King's depiction of this part in the novel would get under anyone's skin who would think twice before cutting a ravioli. The scene in question showed bizarre things coming out of the fortune cookies when the group sat down to dine. Bev opened her cookie to have blood splashing on her, while Richie's revealed a creepy eyeball that slightly moved. Every member of the group had something gruesome come out of their fortune cookie, including a dying bird embryo and a cockroach. Even today, the scene holds a special place in the history of horror storytelling. The ghastly creatures, combined with the Losers Club's pale and startled faces upon realizing Pennywise still had its eyes on them, made the scene morbidly amusing. However, shooting it was quite different. It required practical puppeteers working from underneath the table to make the food come to life. The crew relied heavily on animatronics and puppets rather than on too many special effects to keep things real and within budget. Wallace shared, "The fortune cookie scene is an example of how to get great scare power out of fairly humble, low-budget special effects. a trick table, puppeteers underneath, a handful of creepy little cookie models, a group of characters taken by surprise. So much deepened on the details. Wallace also used a handheld camera for the scene to emphasize on the panic. Tim Curry was saved from the burden of playing all the versions of Pennywise. Wallace originally wanted Tim Curry to play the endless versions of Pennywise in the 1990 It miniseries. However, he realized that would be too much of a burden on him. Curry was already going through long makeup hours to play the clown. Having him do other forms would have been excessive pressure. Wallace thus got different actors to play some of the incarnations of It. For instance, when Ben first encountered It, the entity tried to fool him by disguising itself as his dad, who, according to him, was a fighter pilot who got shot down during the Korean War. The unsettling sequence was played by the famous Canadian actor Steve Mackay, but sadly, he only got brief screen time. On the other hand, Bev's abusive father, Alvin Marsh, was portrayed by a veteran actor, Frank C. Turner. It often took Alvin's form to torment and tease Bev. The other memorable variant was Mrs. Kirsch, the elderly woman Bev met when she returned to her childhood home. Kirsch was a secondary form of It to scare Beverly, and the character was very well played by Florence Patterson. In the series where Bev encountered Mrs. Kirsch, Wallace made sure to give her rotten teeth like those of Pennywise as an incidental detail to convey the idea that something was wrong with the woman. Versions reportedly played by Tim Curry. I know you're wondering about the famous looks of a werewolf and a mummy that Pennywise took on. Honestly, we don't really know who was behind all those prosthetics and heavy makeup, since no other actors have been outrightly credited for the roles. Fans often believe it was Curry himself who appeared in the following forms, apart from being the dancing clown. First up, we have the algae-covered skeleton. When pretending to be Ben's father didn't cut it, it turned into a swamp skeleton who tried to reach out of the lake and grab Ben's feet. The skeleton itself was achieved through special effects, so no actor physically played it per se. However, it's widely known that Curry did the voiceover work when it taunted Ben. Coming to the mummified form of it, which was absolutely grisly to look at, there's no separate actor listed for it. Hence, it can be assumed that it was Tim again, transforming into the Egyptian creature and voicing the dialogue while speaking to Stan when he was birdwatching. However, in the book, it was Ben who witnessed its mummified form. Richie Tozier was another member to experience a horrific vision of Pennywise the werewolf. Again, due to the lack of any specific credit, fans think the werewolf was also played by Curry. Very few actors had to audition for playing the adult versions of the Losers Club members. ABC Network was taking quite the plunge with the It miniseries. They poured in a monumental amount of money and tried to ensure that the show did not face any broadcasting regulations by cutting down on several gory parts. Realizing how high the stakes were, Wallace tried to support the venture by casting well-known television actors to play the adult versions of the Losers Club members. That's precisely why John Ritter, who was famous for his part in Three's Company, and Harry Anderson, known for his presence in Night Court, bagged the roles of Ben and Richie easily. Wallace shared in an interview that most of the adult casting was done through phone calls, without having the actors come down for a physical audition. He explained the characters to them and stated they were brilliant in front of the camera. The kids, on the other hand, had to toil to land the roles. For example, Marlon Taylor, who played the young Mike Hanlon, recalled auditioning twice and getting about 3 to 4 callbacks before he was finally cast. Wallace avoided reading the novel before filming the project. As crazy as that sounds, it was a conscious decision taken by Tommy Wallace. He wanted to get an objective view of the story and thus avoided reading it before filming. He stated that there were people present in the project who had been intimately involved with the book for years, and therefore Wallace could take the risk of not reading a page of it when he sat in the director's chair. He accepted the job after simply reading Cohen's screenplay and later discussed that approaching the series as an outsider allowed him to make creative choices without getting lost in King's sprawling narrative. Allegedly, Wallace read the novel later in his life, and some sources say that he admitted his work was nothing compared to King's magnus opus. Bill Skarsgård has a secret connection to the 1990 miniseries. Skarsgård, who went on to play Pennywise in Andres Muschietti's film adaptations of It in 2017 and reprised his role for It Chapter 2 in 2019, and now for the new HBO series, was destined for the role. Bill was born on August 9, 1990, some 3 months before Curry's Pennywise shook the hell out of us. It gets even more fascinating when we take Pennywise's wake-up cycle into account. It's known to wake up after every 27 years, and when Skarsgård appeared on screen as the second Pennywise after Curry, he was 27 years old. Kinda creepy, but nonetheless very intriguing. Curry as Pennywise had surprisingly less screen time. As I stated before, Tim Curry was inexplicably horrifying as Pennywise and propelled the series forward. However, as the only major antagonist in a horror show, Curry had very little screen time, approximately only about 20 minutes. Undoubtedly, those 20 minutes were enough for him to engrave his name in the history of It adaptations. But it also shed light on a crucial aspect of King's story. The very mention and imagination of Pennywise being around was enough to spook viewers. It didn't even have to appear physically. Moreover, it's always been the eerie ambience that ensured Pennywise's evil aura lingered in Derry. Pennywise is indeed a huge part of the story, but what we often misunderstand is that it is not the entire story. Marvelous verdict. Okay, that was one wild ride. The 1990 It miniseries was far from perfect, but it paved the way for all the brilliant adaptations that followed. In that sense, Wallace and Curry deserve full credit for being the best predecessors they could be. No one had really seen anything as creepy or as real as Pennywise before this. An apparently friendly clown with balloons and a wicked smile, preying on children and feeding on their fear. For its time, budget, and the resources available, the It miniseries delivered far more than expected. It's only natural that a show this iconic is packed with hidden details, and I'm sure there are plenty more behind-the-scenes secrets still waiting to be discovered. Then again, when it comes to Pennywise, some things are better left buried, lest we end up in the sewer. Jokes aside, Pennywise remains the benchmark of horror villains, and we can't thank ABC enough for bringing him to life. Let us know your favorite facts, and feel free to keep adding to the list. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, be very careful while cracking open those fortune cookies. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.